Hi, and welcome to this episode. In this one, I'll talk about how you can set up a practical home gym or ways to train at home for strength training that are not too expensive or are perhaps even totally free. So, giving you a little bit of background, I started doing basic strength training when I started with martial arts, and I was about 15 when we would do lots of push-ups and crunches and all sorts of bodyweight exercises that were supposed to help us get stronger. It wasn't necessarily the best kind of training, but there was a lot of it, and eventually, you became a bit stronger. Doing 100 push-ups was by no means difficult for me after a few years of that. So that worked, but it was obviously not the most effective training because I wanted to compete in martial arts in full contact fighting. So I started going to the gym when I was 18, and that was lifting weights in the more traditional fashion that we know. I pretty much never stopped training. My strength training continued up until today. I'm 53 now, and it took various shapes and sizes over the years. I tried many different protocols, and in my work as a personal trainer, I've trained people on all sorts of equipment. So I can say that there's a wide variety out there, and I'm going to cover some of it today. Now, speaking from experience, I can say that my strength levels right now are much higher than the average male of my size and my age bracket. And this is despite a lot of wear and tear and injuries that I've accumulated over the years of training too hard, mostly in martial arts and self-defense training. But I can still perform a lot of physical tasks that are way beyond the average. Now, none of this is in any way spectacular. It's just proof that I want to give you guys of consistent training. So systematically training over time can help you maintain a lot of strength and many other benefits along the way. You just have to keep going. And I'll cover a little bit more in detail later on. The goal I have is to keep on training for as long as I can, so that I can stay as healthy as possible, but also independent deep into my old age. Because as we get older, it's going to be more difficult to physically do what we are used to doing. And we all sadly get old and die. And very often at the later stages of life, quality of life goes down dramatically, in large part because you just can't move well anymore. One of the things that can help with that is strength training, having a strong musculoskeletal system. And for that, strength and conditioning is actually quite helpful. So my goal is that even when I'm very old, as much as I can, I want to be independent. And I want to be able to live my life the way I want to live it at that point in time. So that's my take now. Now, this episode also fits into an article I wrote a little while ago. It's called The Age of Western Humiliation, which is about geopolitics and what that means for Western world countries. It's a bit controversial. I got a fair amount of pushback against that. People who think I'm out of my mind, and other people who said, like, this is exactly what I've been seeing. Regardless of where you fall on that equation, it doesn't really matter. The reason I say this is very briefly. In my opinion, Western countries are in for several years of a lot of chaos, difficult times, potentially filled with a lot of financial uncertainty or catastrophe even, and limited resources for a lot of people. So the information that I share going forward is a part of it will be geared towards trying to help you get through the quote unquote bad times that are arriving until the good times arrive again. It's not the only thing that I'll be bringing out. Obviously, the regular scheduled programming, as they say, is going to continue, but there's going to be parts that are focused towards this here. And that often means, if we live in difficult times, that money becomes tight and you need to choose wisely how you're going to spend it. So today I'm going to talk about ways to do strength training at price ranges from free, no cost, to relatively cheap, to pricey, but perhaps still attainable. I'll put a link in the show notes to all the equipment that I mentioned, and also to the article that I just mentioned. So the Age of Western Humiliation. If you don't want to read it, that's fine. But just to be thorough, I'll put it all in there. Now, Before we get started, why focus on strength training? Not just in my opinion, but both in my experience from my own training, but training hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of clients over the years as a personal trainer, I can attest to, if you say anything about strength training, it is that best bang for buck for health is an accurate statement. If you only do one thing, you don't have to do only one thing, but if you only do one thing, if you have to pick one, I would always choose strength training. Why? For a variety of reasons. It has a tremendous amount of physical health benefits. And these happen regardless of your age and your fitness level. So it works when you're very young, very old. If you're in shape, out of shape, strength training will yield you benefits. Now, what are those? A lot of things. Musculoskeletal system, so your bones and muscles. The bone density gets stronger, especially for women, for instance, osteoporosis, the basically weakening of the bones. That can be prevented or mitigated to a certain degree with strength training. You also preserve muscle mass, which is one of the main problems as we get older. We lose muscle mass, and that has this kind of snowball effect that rolls down a hill of things becoming more complicated and health going down the drain. Weight management, you build muscle with strength training. Well, muscle burns calories, body fat doesn't. So if you want to do weight loss and or weight management, strength training is just one of the best ways to go about it, or at the very least, an important addition to it. There's many chronic diseases that you can help avoid, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and so on. Also the joints themselves, so your muscles, your tendons, and so on, in and around your joints will become stronger, and it's going to protect them from injury, but it also helps you improve flexibility and mobility if you train accordingly. So there's a lot of things that just purely physically speaking will help you, and the main thing is that improves how your body functions. So that makes everyday tasks a lot easier, and it's going to also help you reduce the risks of falling. Again, especially as you get older. If you're young and you're listening to this, you're like, I don't care, I can fall, I can get back up again. Yeah, once you get my age and older, let's say in your 60s, and you fall and you break something, the statistics are quite clear. That's when you are seriously at risk of dying in the next, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 3 years. If I'm not mistaken, it was about like 65 or 70 years old. If you fall and you break something, then there's like a 50% chance of dying within 3 years. It could be less. It's been a while since I talked to my son, who's a physical therapist, and he gave me that stat. So everybody should be motivated to be strong, especially as you get older. And the upside is that you can train this relatively easily. Again, I'll get into it. Speaking of benefits, there's a few mental and cognitive ones. So the first one is your mood, and stress regulation. So it's going to help reduce the symptoms of depression, anxiety, and so on, make you feel a little bit better mood-wise. And in many cases, it helps with self-esteem issues as well. But most of all, one of the biggest mental and I think cognitive benefits is better sleep. Sleep quality is one of the most important things when it comes to health, is getting enough sleep, getting enough quality sleep. And we're living in, especially in the Western world, where a lot of people don't sleep enough or have poor quality sleep. And that is very much correlated with a lot of health issues, especially later on. For instance, Alzheimer's is related to lack of proper sleep and so on. So that's all reasons why we do that. Now, I'll give you a few things. Strength training is not bodybuilding. It's also not powerlifting. You don't need to go to these extremes to get the benefits I mentioned. So that's important. Second thing, it's supposed to be easy to do. You don't necessarily need a lot of expensive equipment, though it's nice to have some, or to train and work out in a gym that has like the top of the line equipment. But it's not that you can't do it without all that stuff. Typically, you can do it pretty much anywhere. So there's plenty of bodyweight stuff that you can do, and you don't need a lot of space. Regardless of where you are, you can work out. There's also no age limit. The human body will respond effectively to strength training even if you're in your 70s, 80s, or even older. Again, there have been plenty of experiments on that front as well, and the research bears that out. So most of all, I would say that if you train for martial arts and self-defense, strength training is going to have a huge impact on making your techniques faster and stronger and so on. So that's just me giving you guys what I would say the health pitch of why do we do that. Moving on now before we start, I'll mention price ranges and in the show notes, so please go to the show notes, that's wimsblog.com/ and then the number of this episode. If you go there, I'll have links to where you can buy some of the equipment. It's not the only place, but it'll give you somewhere to start. Now, as of me putting this online, the prices were accurate, but that may change over time. So if you come to this episode later, prices may have changed. Now that said, I'm going to point you guys to stores where you can buy it new, but you could often buy a lot of this stuff much cheaper secondhand. Or if there's like a sales period or something special going on, you might want to consider going that route if your budget is very limited. That's all the preparation. Now we can get to it. So I'll try to cover as much as possible the options that we have, starting from totally free to increasingly requiring a little bit more of an investment. First off, bodyweight training. What is that? Well, calisthenics, a lot of other stuff, push-ups, jumping jacks, all that kind of stuff. It only requires your own body, so you don't need anything. I would say it's optional to have a mat. If you want to do ground exercise, it's a little bit more comfortable, but you can do it without. You can do it inside, you can do it outside on the grass, at the beach, whatever, it doesn't matter. You really just need your own body and a very small amount of space. For the upper body, if you have access to it, sure you can do push-ups, but if you can do a pull-up, you have a bar somewhere that you can use pull-ups on. When I lived in my apartment, and I stopped going to the gym because I was just divorced and didn't have money anymore, I would go into the stairwell and just hang from the landing of the story upstairs and just do my pull-ups there, just my legs dangling into the void. I was younger then and stronger, so it was okay. I never slipped or anything, but just using finger grip to do my pull-ups. You can use a tree branch. You could even do rows inverted underneath a table that is strong enough to hold your body weight. There's plenty of options that you don't necessarily need to buy something. You just use your body weight wherever you can. Lower body, there's tons of stuff, like you can do different kinds of bodyweight squats, step ups on in a stairwell. I used to do a lot of that as well. Single leg squats, pistol squats, all that kind of stuff. So there's plenty that you can do in that regard with just your own body. And even advanced athletes can sometimes get solid strength training done that way and actually make some gains there. It's all about intensity and protocols, which I'm not going to go into too much here, but you know that it works. If you've been training this for a while and you want to go a little bit further and it feels to you still that, okay, I want to switch towards weights, but I don't want to spend the money. Okay, try this. Do the same exercise that you do, but with minimal rest. So you just go from one to the other. And you form kind of a circuit. So it's a form of circuit training where you have either minimal rest, just the time to get ready into the next exercise. Let's say you do go from push-ups to squats, something along those lines. Just the time to get back up again from the push-ups and then do your squats and then immediately just go back into the push-up position and keep going, so that the intensity is going to rise because you don't have a break. So your heartbeat stays high, your body's going to have to struggle to recover with that little time in between exercises. It's an easy way to make bodyweight training more expensive, because that's basically what is the one main downside that a lot of people complain about, is that as you get stronger, especially if you're a young and healthy guy, you're like, this isn't enough, I want to make it heavier. A good way to work, I would say, is, like I said, alternating exercises rapidly in a circuit. But you can also work agonist and antagonist muscles in sequence. So you're always constantly doing the one and then the other. Let's say that you are going to do chest, some form of push-ups, immediately get up and followed by pull-ups. Again, if you have a bar somewhere that you can use, or like I said, in the stairwell, be careful with that kind of stuff. Don't break a leg as you fall down. So you work opposing muscles. You do something for biceps, immediately followed by triceps. As the bicep exercise is done, you let that muscle rest while you do triceps, because they do opposing actions on your body, the way you move your body. Then as one rests, the other one works. If you're doing a bicep exercise correctly, your triceps will not get involved. It can't really get involved unless you mess it up. If you're doing push-ups, your back muscles are really not all that engaged. And vice versa, if you're doing back work, your chest muscles aren't really all that engaged. So they can rest while you immediately switch to the other exercise, which helps you speed things up. That's the whole goal. So that's it for bodyweight exercises. Again, totally free. Next option, we're looking at relatively inexpensive equipment alternatives. I would start with elastic bands, resistance bands. And you're going to have a price range between, like, could be $10, could be $30, $40, depending on what exactly you buy, how long the elastic band is, and what type of resistance it gives. But starting from $10, you can find stuff. Now, the upside, very affordable, and there's a lot of like full sets out there of different kind of resistances with the elastic bands that are good quality and still cheap, and also quite durable. You've got different types. You've got these long open-ended bands that are several feet long that you can wrap around your own body, or step on and then do the curls, for instance, as you stand up. You can wrap it around a tree or a pole, or hang it over a bar that you use for pull-ups to do downward pulling motions and so on. You can do a lot of exercises that way. It's quite easy to just use, because it's very light, and that allows you to do a huge variety of exercises. Now, there's also these loops, these circular resistance bands that are a little bit different. They're typically heavy duty, and you can use those in a different way, where, for instance, if you want to do squats, you stand on the bottom part of the loop, and the other part you put on your shoulders, so that it pulls you down and you have to fight that resistance. Same thing, you could do some sort of deadlift exercise where you stand on the loop band and then pull it up high as you do a deadlift. Overall, I would say that there is quite a bit of variety that you can do with resistance bands. The downside is that it requires you to fully stabilize your body and maintain the right structure, both stationary and in movement. Unlike with machines, they tend to support you. So that's important. Next up, a little bit more expensive, I would say, are kettlebells. You can find those, depending on the quality and so on, $15-20 all the way go to 100 and more, depending on how much weight you actually need. Now, the upside is that very often you don't need a whole collection of kettlebells. You might want that, but you don't necessarily need one. So starting with a few, you can actually go a long way. And you don't always need two of each, because a lot of kettlebell exercises can be done with one hand, so that you might only have one of the heavier ones if it's otherwise too expensive for you. You can use kettlebells for isolated training. Like I said, you could do a bicep curl with an elastic band, but also with a dumbbell, a barbell, or you can do it with a kettlebell. You can use it that way. But the upside that is particular to kettlebells is that you can do dynamic swinging motions, full body motions, and so on. Going up and down, side to side. You can even throw it up in the air and catch it, which is a little bit more advanced. So there's a lot you can do that is quite taxing. It's quite intensive. I would say that these kind of workouts are a little bit more challenging than bodyweight, because they're going to have a little bit of a learning curve, because it's harder than just maintaining your body in a certain position and then moving up only a part of it, let's say squats or deadlifts or push-ups or rows and so on. These are relatively straightforward exercises. Some of the workouts that you can do with kettlebells, some of the exercises in there are a lot more complex technically speaking. I would say start with one or two kettlebells at different weights that allow you to do a full body circuit and see how far you get before, as opposed to immediately buying tons and tons of kettlebells at all weights. Now, the other upside with kettlebells is that you typically don't need a lot of space. With minimal space, just a few square feet, basically, you'll be able to get a fair amount done. If you have more space, that's great. If you can train outside, that's even better. But you don't necessarily need a gigantic workout area. Next up would be a suspension trainer, kind of like the TRX is the best known. Plenty of price ranges, going from $20-25 to 150 or more, depending on quality and so on. The main advantage of a suspension trainer is that it's light, it's portable, and it also uses body weight, so you don't need to have a weight stack or anything. Now you can buy a really solid one, a good quality one, and I would advise you to do so, like TRX, or you can make one yourself. I made one many years ago, very cheap. I think it cost me like $15-20 or something, and it worked okay. You can also make one just from chains. Like I made one with my heavy bag attachment to the ceiling of my garage. I just hung 2 long iron chains from there, and that allowed me to make adjustable handles, which I didn't have with the first suspension trainer that I made myself. So I would have handles with ropes attached to them and then clips, and I would attach them at different sections of the chain for the variety of exercises that I like to do. With the original handle, changing the distance, the length of the cable, that didn't work. So again, plenty of do-it-yourself videos online if you want to try that, so give it a try. If not, I would say invest in a good TRX, because it's going to be so much easier to adjust the length and so on. You typically also get a wall mount or a ceiling mount and a door mount, which is a door anchor that you put on top of your door that allows you to work with the TRX even if you can't attach it somewhere permanently. So you get that stuff that I would think is quite handy. But you can make it yourself. Suspension trainers, large variety of exercises, but there are also limits. For instance, you need to be able to hang it high enough and have a certain amount of distance from a wall to get into certain positions. And in certain exercises, that's actually important. That means that a ceiling or a wall anchor might be needed for you, and that means drilling into walls or ceilings. Now, depending on where you live and who you live with, that may or may not be an option, so gotta check that out first. You can also use it outdoors, hang it from a tree or somewhere else if you have access to that. But then again, you're dependent on weather. If you live like I do in a country where it rains a lot, that's not really the best solution. So that's why I tend to advise people, if it's possible, do it in the garage. Because typically, it's not that much of an aesthetic problem if you drill into a wall or into the ceiling there. And then it's just a matter of getting your car out of the garage and you work out. So that's not that much of a big deal. The other limit is that certain muscle groups are harder to train, in my opinion, and I would say especially for beginners. And one example is shoulder exercises. They tend to be more difficult to do with a TRX, and there are not that many basic exercises for the shoulders on a suspension trainer compared to other muscle groups. And one more limit that I found is that if you have an injury and you can't hang from the suspension trainer without train, you can't train. And it's more common than you might think. You could pull a muscle or you can have something else going on and you can't get into a certain position, even though it's not the muscle that you're training, the one that is injured, or the area that you feel the injury. You're not training that muscle, but just getting into position and hanging from the suspension trainer is what gives you pain. That's not that much an issue with other equipment. If I have a problem with my legs, but I still have my dumbbells or my kettlebells, I can sit down on a chair and still do a workout for my arms and my shoulders. Not necessarily so with the suspension trainer. So something to bear in mind. I'm moving on in price range and way of training. That would be barbells and dumbbells. So a dumbbell is a hand weight, typically a small handle with weights on either side. Barbell is the same thing, but a long bar that you use to attach discs with weights on, and you secure them. The prices range for these anywhere from $50 to a couple $100, 300 or more, depending on, again, quality, how much weight you need, and so on. The barbell, again, a long bar with weight plates. You can put a lot of heavy weights on there. I mean, you can load it and do really intense workouts for legs, for chest, for back, and so on. Why? Because you can have so much weight on there. So if you're advanced and if you've been training for a while, that is typically a good option for you. Dumbbells is same thing. They're smaller. It's kind of like a one-handed version of a barbell, but a lot smaller. And that gives you a little bit more versatility exercise-wise. The price is going to depend on how much weight you need. That's the key point. Now, if you buy solid dumbbells, meaning you can't adjust them, the price is going to go up because you're going to need a lot of them. I use the metric system, so you can have 5 kilograms, 7.5, 10, 12.5, 15, and so on, or you can go from 1 to 10. That's a lot of equipment to buy. If you have adjustable handles, it's going to be a lot easier. You have to spend some time unscrewing the safety and then putting the right weight on and then screwing it back on again. But it allows you to not have that many individual dumbbells that you have to use. So again, it depends. With dumbbells and barbells, I would recommend getting an adjustable bench. That means that the part where you put your back on can be in an incline or decline position or all the way vertical. That allows you to do a lot more exercises. If you're going to train hard, especially for legs, I would suggest also getting a rack that you can place the barbell on, especially for chest press or squat or deadlifts and so on. So it's worth the investment for safety and also ease of use. Just this week, I saw a video of a man doing a chest press though with a thumbless grip. So instead of grabbing the barbell with his thumb in a solid grip, he put it on away from it. It slipped off. It fell on his chest, and basically, it cracked, and he died soon after. So safety is an important thing, especially if you train by yourself. If you train alone, plenty of videos out there that you can see of people doing heavy workouts in strength training and then passing out and falling over. If you're lying there and you hit your head on the way down and you're bleeding, if nobody knows what's going on, that's not a good thing. So consider safety, especially if you train really, really hard. To give you an example, I use the same adjustable dumbbell set that I got as a teenager for my birthday. Again, like I said, 20 years later when I was divorced and had to save money and just got rid of my gym membership, and it worked fine. It wasn't as fun because I was very much enjoying a lot of the really good equipment I had at the gym, but you know what, it was that or nothing. So I used my dumbbell set and that worked just fine. And then you have to you go back to the bodyweight exercises and so on. You can get a fair amount of training done just with a set of dumbbells. You don't have to go all out, buy a bunch of dumbbells, a bunch of weights, a bunch of weight plates, one barbell, an easy curl barbell, and so on. There's no need right away to go into a shopping spree. I would say the main downside is, like I said, safety is important. And changing the weights is always going to require that you remove the safety clip, put the new weight on, put it back on, and so on. And that can be a little bit tiresome. But then again, it's very cheap. So perfection doesn't exist. There's always a trade-off, and this is a trade-off here. Now, I don't mind as much, but I know some people mind that. So it's not an issue with, for instance, resistance bands or kettlebells, because the resistance is always the same there. Right, now we get to the pricier options, and that would be a home gym, a multi-gym machine, So that's one big machine that you can do a bunch of exercises on. I would say, realistically speaking, anything below 500 euros or dollars is not going to be worth it. You could try it, but I would advise against it. They come in a large variety of sizes and configurations. They can start really, really simple or be very expansive and have different stations on it as well. I have a relatively decent one here at home that I got for my 50th birthday as a gift, and I've been training on that one ever since, and it's great. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. You don't have to get that one, but I can attest that it works quite well. So the advantage is that this kind of multi-gym can handle a lot of exercises. It's kind of like an alternative to going to a gym itself, where you have a bunch of specific exercise machines that are doing one or two exercises at most for specific muscle groups, and they are ergonomically very well suited to that. A home gym kind of simulates that, so there's a little bit of a compromise in the ergonomics. However, you have the weight stack if you use a weight stack like mine does, and that allows you to get all the different leverages, have the handles high, medium, low, and so on. So it gives you a lot of versatility in your training with relatively heavy weights or lighter ones. You can adjust the pin in the weight stack to make it as heavy or as light as you want. So that's a good option. There are alternatives to weight stacks. That would be something like the Total Gym. It's been around forever. Chuck Norris made a lot of commercials for that. It uses cables and body weight. There's something like Bowflex, which uses these rods that you put behind the machine, and they offer resistance as you pull with the cables. So these last two, Total Gym and Bowflex, are relatively light, easy to store, whereas obviously a weight stack and a multi-gym at home, that's not going to move. You put it somewhere, it doesn't move. The advantages: heavy resistance is possible, a lot more than if you use resistance bands or free weights or something along those lines, or bodyweight exercises. Why? Again, because you have the weight stack or the high resistance, so you can train much, much harder. If you've been training for a long time, or you plan to do so, I think it's worth the investment. It's typically safer because if you drop the handle, it's not necessarily going to fall on top of you like the bar does if you mess up with the chest press. So there's less risk of injury in that regard. There's not zero risk, but I think there's less risk if you don't train like an idiot, you'll be safer. The versatility of the movements, obviously, you can do classical strength training, but you can also do more dynamic, what nowadays they call functional training. That's also typically available. Why? Because you have a weight stack and a pulley system, and that's basically what you need. And if you can have an adjustable pulley, which typically happens, so you can put the handle where you pull against the resistance, you can put it at different heights. That allows for a multitude of exercises that other solutions don't offer you. What are the disadvantages? Well, it's expensive. It tends to be the most expensive solution. It takes up plenty of space and it doesn't move. So once you put it down, you won't just pick it up and move it. And it might require some maintenance. My experience is not much, but not nothing either. Making sure that everything just, you might have to oil it a little bit so that it stays very smooth the way the machine works, so that exercise becomes easy and so on. So I would say that, if you can live with all that, I would advise, if you can spend the money, to go that route if you like classical weight training, and which I like to do a lot. If you compare to what does a gym membership cost, let's say for the next 5 to 10 years, and then calculate the total of that, and then compare that to buying a machine yourself, you might come to the conclusion that it's cheaper to buy a multi-gym at home and get rid of the membership at the club. If you need the membership to motivate yourself to go train, you want to have a lot of people around you, or you do it with somebody else and so on. That's a different factor. But I have never looked back. I have zero ambition to go to a gym anymore. I've got everything I need at home. So that kind of covers it, everything. And again, I'll put links in the show notes for everybody to check out equipment wise. Now, let me say a few more things before you get started. The core training principle, if you want to make progress, you want to do each set hard enough, so and by that I mean intense enough to come close to muscle failure. That would be you have maybe 1 or 3 reps in reserve until you get to exhaustion. You don't have to go to complete exhaustion. You can, that's pretty hardcore, you can. You don't have to do it every single time, in every single set, in every single session, constantly. It works. It also risks overtraining and injury, but that's a different talk. So for now, I would say that you need to be able to train hard enough. Let's say again, we take the bicep curl, just straightening and bending the arm, lifting a weight up. You have to be able to do it X amount of reps, and that you feel that you can do maybe 1 or 2 or even maybe 3 more. But then you start swinging the weight up and cheating, then you know that, okay, that's the intensity that you should be going for at a minimum if you want to get results. Anything is better than nothing training wise, but then there's also proper training that's going to be even more effective. This is a little bit controversial what I just said, because a lot of people still think that you have to fully exhaust yourself in every single workout for strength and conditioning gains, but the research nowadays bears out that that's not absolutely necessary. The different options that I gave you guys here, it all depends on personal preference. So when you compare the training tools, the experience is going to be different, and a personal preference is going to play a big role. By far, I prefer training on my multi-gym here at home as opposed to using the resistance bands or kettlebells. I have these two as well. So that's a personal preference. And for you, it could be different. So take that into account before you actually start buying stuff. Try to test it out. Go to a place or a friend, somebody who has what you're considering to buy, and see if you like it. Let me give you an example to make it a little bit more just, realistic, or try to paint you a picture so it makes sense. So let's take again the dumbbell bicep curl. So if you're standing upright, okay, and you're just standing upright and your arm is hanging next to you, vertical at your side, you keep your elbows against your ribs so that you don't swing your elbow, and then you're bringing your hand upwards, and that's going to curl the weight upward by bending at the elbow until your forearm is pointing about diagonally upwards, and then you lower it back down again. Now, the resistance curve with dumbbells is based on gravity. That means that if your arm is straight, the first half of bending your elbow until your forearm is horizontal, that's going to be the hardest, because gravity pulls the weight down, and the biomechanical leverage you have at that point is not great. The second half of the dumbbell curl, where you go from horizontal towards diagonally upwards with your dumbbell, with your forearm, that's going to be easier, because again, the mechanical advantage is better there at the elbow joint. So as you go down again, and then you repeat, this is going to play over and over. Now, contrast that doing a dumbbell curl instead of with a dumbbell, you're going to use an elastic band that you grab a hold of in your hand, and the other part you put your foot on that on that part, and you stand up. And the resistance is the band resists as you do the same movement. Now, typically the first half of the movement, so starting from vertical going towards horizontal, which was the hardest with a dumbbell, is actually the easiest with the elastic band, because it's not stretched out as much, and there's less resistance than in the last part from horizontal to diagonally upward in the dumbbell curl. Then the resistance band stretches even more and the tension becomes higher. So it's a complete opposite power curve of a dumbbell or a barbell or a kettlebell. So the reason why I say that is that the different leverage through different ranges of motion is going to give different results. They're both good. They both get results, but the feel is different. You might enjoy the one and loathe the other. I train people, and I've trained them for a long time, who have no issue with dumbbells and barbells and machines, but they just don't want to touch resistance bands. That's fine. Give it a try before you buy to avoid regretting it later. A few practical things. I would say whatever you heard me say here, you might have heard somebody else talk about it or read about it or saw a video online about it. Don't just dismiss it immediately if it feels different from the method of training that you're used to. Like I said, they work. They all work. It just depends for a large part on the different kind of material that you have access to. Another thing is, if you only have access to one of these, for instance, when you travel, taking elastic bands with you is very easy if you know that there's probably not going to be a gym. Instead of skipping all your workouts and just losing whatever progress you made, okay, just do the elastic band workouts even if you really don't like them. I typically take those with me when I travel, and even in a small hotel room I can do a pretty decent workout with just the resistance of the resistance bands themselves. They don't weigh much, they don't take up a lot of space, so it's easy to take along when you travel. I still prefer my multi-gym at home, but if that isn't there, at least I'm doing something training-wise. Overall, I would say that the mindset should be, when you want to train at home and not spend too much money, is that you don't always get to train under ideal conditions. You want to make the best of what you have. What is the most important factor? And that's consistency. So you want to build a habit that is sustainable in the long run of just working out. Now, I would say that a minimum effective dose would be at least 2 non-consecutive days workouts per week, like a bare minimum. And then you train all the muscle groups that you want to make stronger. That is enough when you're a beginner to make some progress at first. Now, over time, you might need more regular and more intense workouts, but a minimum can get you a long way if you're a beginner. And that would mean doing, like I said, full body workouts, legs, arms, chest, back, and so on. Another way of working is that you would do 4 to 5 workouts, but you only focus on 1 or 2 muscle groups per workout. To take chest and back on one day, the legs, front and back side of the legs the next day, arms and abs the final day. It's a classical split. So you pick 2 exercises per muscle group and you do them back to back. Like I've explained before, agonist, antagonist, chest and back muscles, bicep and triceps, quadriceps and hamstrings. You group those, changing, one rests while the other works out. And that means that you can be done in 10 to 15 minutes or even less with a workout. So that's one example. There's other protocols that maximize the time you spend versus the result that you can get. So I would advise you to experiment and see if that works for you. A final point, there's a lot of free resources online and YouTube videos and so on. There's a lot you can find online, workout schedules, exercises for anything that you can think of, freely available. It's also not difficult to find a personal trainer to help you get started, and that will be a key thing. If you want to have the benefits, you don't want to go too hard right away. You want to focus on good technique in the exercises at first and have some basic knowledge of, okay, how should I move this weight in a safe manner that is also effective to get the strength increase that you're training for. A few plugs for my stuff. I've got a few instructional videos that cover some of these options. First one is power control, which is about increasing strength and control in martial arts and self-defense techniques. Again, all the links will be in the show notes. Resistance band workouts. I made this one during the pandemic because the gyms were closed and people asked, what can I do? And I started doing Zoom lessons and so on. And then taught a lot of people how to use a resistance band if you can't go to the gym. So that video is available too. I have also an instructional video, which is kind of a lecture, which is about building a consistent home training routine. And there the focus is thinking long term, not quick wins. And you have to understand that when you're young, you might just want to be stronger, so you punch and kick fast, harder and faster. But as you get older, health and longevity are going to overtake you, probably in your priority list, because you want to stay healthy as long as you can, like I said, even as you get very old. And you probably won't be fighting in the ring anymore if you're 70, but you will still be moving about the house and picking stuff up and so on and trying to live your life. So your focus might change. Regardless, you wanna have a consistent training routine, and that's what that video is all about. So basically, it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's pretty much what I have for you guys. So the conclusion is, do what works for you. Don't start by spending a lot of money. I would suggest if money is tough and limited, and there's a lot of chaos in the world and so on, experiment, try out different options, see what works for you, and then again, focus on the long term, not on quick wins. And that's it for now. As always, I appreciate the support. Like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Share this one with people you think might find useful, and check out the show notes for all the things I mentioned. Okay, that's it, guys. Bye-bye.